Okay guys, we're back. Chapter 5. Ur of the Chaldees, reference to Ireland as Ur. Having we consider fully introduced the question that Chaldea was in west of Europe, although we have only given our reasons in part for so placing it, it becomes necessary to refer here, in connection with Ur, to an old Bible personage of importance, the grandson of Arphaxad, Eber or Heber. There is found in Irish tradition a Heber whose name was given to Ireland, and which is to be perceived in the word Hibernia. Whether the Bible Heber and Heber of Irish history may be the same does not concern us so much as the fact that Ireland has preserved to the present time more distinct marks of the ancient Ur that can be pointed out to in any other country, whether Asia or Europe. Besides Ireland having had once the name of Hibernia from Heber, there are names derived from Heber in England and Scotland. In Scotland, Hebrides. In England, the old name of York, Eboracum or Hebericum. It may appear, as argument unfolds itself, that the balance of proof will rest on the side of the Irish Heber having been a veritable Hebrew. A stronghold of the Hebrew was Iberia, a name under which Spain was once known. A great deal of the mystery that surrounds Heber may be cleared away when we remember our teaching that the scripture Hebrew was Chaldean first, and then Hebrew, and afterwards Israelite, and that it is recorded that Melesius, the father of the Heber of Ireland, came with his son out of Iberia into Ireland. Iberia and Tarshish are acknowledged by most of our recent Bible commentators to be one place, that is Spain. It is told in Psalms, in the prayer of David for his son Solomon, that the kings of Tarshish and of the isles shall bring us presents. There is good testimony in this of the prosperity of Iberia. We think the position of Tarshish out of the east brings many other supposed eastern places with it westwards. The allusion to the kings of the isles of the sea carries also significance, probably meaning the British Isles. The remains of the old Hibernia in Spain may be said to be present in the designation Celtae Iberia, and no doubt Galatia. Whether we can reconcile the two Hebers to have been one and the same person is, as we have said before, of little consequence in considering Ur of the Chaldees, Ireland. The first mention of Ur is in Genesis, and Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity, in Ur of the Chaldees. The next reference is in the 31st verse of the same chapter, as follows: And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son's Abram's wife, and they went forth with him from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came into Haran, and dwelt there. It is to be misunderstood that we interpret the foregoing passages as meaning that Terah belonged to Ur, as we place it, and went eastward to Canaan. The district called Haran, no doubt, received its name through Terah, in remembrance of his son Haran, who died in Ur. It is possible that there was a country or district of Haran in Ireland at the time of Terah's departure, or subsequently, for there are names of places there and near there that have withstood the wear and tear of time and remind us of Haran. They will be alluded to in another place. When Heber entered Ireland, he was welcomed by a company of Druids and ladies of the race, in name of Lagaid, or Lud, the brother of Arphaxad. The Ludites are described as Nennius, as a great rolling wave, and their descendants are known in the British Islands by the comparatively modern name of Lloyd, Luard, Loudon. In Wales and Ireland, MacLeod or sons of Lud in Scotland. This race of Lud extended over a considerable portion of Western Europe. The old names of Leons and Lugdunum, Lugdunasis, that of Normandy, Main Lud near Loch Marie Care, and Omorica is a place that is remarkable for its megalithic remains, sculptured with the same kind of characters found on stones in several parts of Ireland. Then we have Ludlow, Ludwig, Ludborough, Luddenfoot, Ludgate, and the old name for the city of London, Caer Lud, or Saer Lud, which is that of the 3 seats of the Archdruids of Britain. Perhaps one of the oldest customs on record is the annual tribute to Her Majesty the Queen of £20 in gold from Aberfrew, Anglesey, levied by Lud, who is said to have been the Archdruid, or king, and founder of London. Although the account is interesting, we can only give it here an abbreviated form. The King of London shall be entitled to 3 tributes, a tribute of gold from Aberfrew amounted to £20, a tribute in honey from Dinevor amounted to 4 tons, and a tribute of oatmeal from Powys Wenva of 4 sons. It is not known to us when the tribute of honey from Dinevor was discontinued, nor when the oatmeal from Powys Wenva ceased to be carried to London, but this we can say, that even as late as last year the tribute of gold was collected by Her Majesty's agent of Woods and Forests, now residing at Caernarvon. The Dinevor above referred to is still in existence, and no doubt can be identified as the Dinahaba of Genesis and Cron. If Ireland was Ur, we must show some analogy between its druidical religion and that of Genesis. First, then, in order to clear the way for the introduction of more detailed matter illustrative of the people, antiquities, and literature of Ireland and its primitive faith, we present to our readers' judgment a view of what is written about the principal, at least the most conspicuous, monuments of Ireland and their connection with the pre-Christian belief there, we mean the Round Towers. The substance of what is thought about these towers is that they may be African or Phoenician towers, or towers of Persian or Chaldean magi. That is to say, they may have been towers for celestial observation, sorcerers' towers, fire towers of a restored Zoroastrian faith, or they may have been, according to the credulous Petrie, structures erected by the side of Christian churches. We give a passage from the learned Dr. Lanigan, who, although quoted by Petrie with great respect, is left steering a safe middle course between Mr. Petrie's scepticism and General Vallancey's fanciful learning. Dr. Lanigan says, "The great similarity of those towers in the interior of Hindustan to our Irish round towers has convinced me that this mode of architecture was introduced into Ireland in the times of paganism. The patterns from which the construction of our towers was imitated were most probably the fire temples of the Persians and others who followed the Magian religion as formed by Zerdusht, or as he is usually called, Zoroastrius. Those temples were usually round, and some of them were raised to a great height. That fire in pagan times, an object of worship, or at least great veneration in Ireland, and particularly the sun, which was considered the greatest of all fires, is an indubitable fact. Now the lower part of an Irish round tower might answer very well for a temple, that is, a place in which an altar on which the sacred fire was preserved, or the middle floors could have served as habitations for the persons employed in watching it. The highest part of the tower was an observatory, intended for celestial observations, as I think evidently appears from the 4 windows being placed directly opposite the 4 cardinal points. The veneration in which the pagan Irish held the heavenly bodies, and especially the sun, must have led them to apply astronomical pursuits which were necessary also for determining the length of their years, the celestial and equinoctial times, and the precise periods of the annual festivals. I find it stated that the doors of most of these towers face the west. If this be correct, it will add an argument to show that they contained fire temples, for the Magians always advanced from the west side to worship the fire. According to the hypothesis, the round towers existed in Ireland before churches were built. I see no reason to deny that they did, and the particular style of their construction shows they are very ancient. But then, it is said, How did it happen that they are usually found near old churches? In the first place, this is not universally true. Secondly, it is to be observed that these towers used to be built in towns or villages of some note, such, in fact, as required in Christian times. Thus, wherever there was a round tower, a church was afterwards erected, but not vice versa, whereas there were thousands of churches in Ireland without any such towers in the vicinity of them. Thirdly, there was a prudential motive for the teachers of Christian faith to build churches near the site of round towers, what they might thereby attract their new converts to worship the true God in the very places they had been in the practice of worshipping the sun and the fire. It may be that some of these towers were built after the establishment of Christianity in Ireland for penitential purposes, as already alluded to, although I have some doubts about it, but I think it can scarcely be doubted that the original models according to which they were constructed belonged to the times of paganism, and that the singular style of architecture which we observe in them was brought from the East, between which and this country it is certain that there was an intercourse at a very ancient period of time. Eclectical History, volume, page 406 to 408. There can be no doubt that the towers in the interior of Hindustan bear more than a striking likeness to those remaining in Ireland. These resemblances are to be found in such great quantities in the latter place that it is impossible but to believe Ireland was the centre from which a great deal of the religion of Bud developed. This will not appear strange when we consider, in connection with the point, that many of the same saints of Ireland bear Aryan and Semitic names. Thus we have Saint Dagon, Dagon the god of the Philistines, Saint Moloch, the idol Moloch, Saint D, Ul, devil in Irish, Saint Satan, Satan the destroyer, Saint Cronan, Kronos the Titan, Saint Vulcan, the Vulcan of mythology, Saint Chiron, Chiron the centaur, Saint Nessan, Nessus the centaur, Saint Declan, Declan the god of generation, Saint Luan, Luan the moon, Saint Derarca, Der Ers, the oak of the ark, Saint Dermaid, Dermaid, the branch of the oak. This is another thing I've looked at, guys, the saints. I've probably got more saints than these ones here. That's probably connected with the Middle Eastern religions. Keane says of these names, and referring to many other that could be quoted here, that their space permit. In my opinion, all of these names can be traced to heathen derivations. And there are many besides which are only Latinized modifications. Excuse me. Much of the ancient literature of Ireland was destroyed by the early Christians. They found it necessary in many cases to preserve to the Christianized Irish the names of many gods and heroes of their forefathers. If not, how are we to account for the inheritance of such names of saints as given above? But there are hundreds of the kind peculiar to Ireland. This is what I was talking about earlier, guys, in the earlier chapters, when I discovered the Celtic god Shoni, the sea god, Celtic sea god, and then it got Christianized to John, but it was Sean and then John. But this sea god was local to that area in Scotland. You must agree with Dr. Lanigan that the pagan Irish venerated the sun and heavenly bodies so much that they must have been well practised in astronomical pursuits, and so determined the length of their years, the celestial and equinoctial times, and the exact periods of the annual festivals. As to there having been intercourses between the East and Ireland at a very ancient period of time, there cannot be the slightest doubt, but the patterns of these towers were brought from the East, westwards through Europe, and into Ireland, is more than we are prepared to believe on the authority of those who have preferred to find the birth of archaicism anywhere but in Europe. Why they're not among the hundreds of millions of people of the East who should be supposed to have preserved some such fire towers, monuments of their primitive faith, such reminders of it are to be found in Ireland. The thousands of miles of country and continent they travelled over in Europe and Asia must have to an extent dissipated their original belief, just as the new contacts they experienced must have exercised their intelligence, accelerated by different temperatures, exigencies of living, etc., to the unprejudiced scholar and thinker, not necessarily the man who studied the languages, antiquities, and comparative mythology of Europe, the Celt has left an eternal register of his occupancy there, corresponding beyond doubt with the Shinar of the Bible, and consequently the Chaldea and Ur of that book. Besides the numerous round towers of Ireland, there are quantities of stone remains that there must have originated with the peoples of Genesis. These stone remains have often particular reference to the Assyrian-Egyptian god periods, and will be found to have great value in showing how Christianity has retained, often without our knowing, many of the emblems and forms of faith distinctly traceable to a prehistoric but certain Aryan and Semitic and Hamitic source, such as the Irish language has the equivalents of hundreds of its words in Sanskrit, Hebrew, Arabic, and other languages, until lately believed to have had no affinity with one another, and of course no affinity with Irish. In like manner, they would have been thought dreamers who in a less enlightened age than the present proposed to show that the origin of many of the Ninevite, Babylonian, and Egyptian monuments is referable to Western Europe. Bryant, Keane, Hislop, and others call the early stone remains of Europe Cuthite, but they may be proven to have had their origin principally with the posterity of Shem and Japhet, who must have been the first inhabitants of Europe, as not only their monuments testify, but the names of the places and people to the present day. Many architectural stone ornaments of Nineveh, India, and Egypt, even in some cases the ancient American architectural stone ornaments, have, in some cases, exact resemblance to those found in Ireland. The symbols of the archaic kings, prophets, and priests were, as a matter of course, remembered by the people and reproduced by them wherever they went. This will account for modification in form, as it does for the relationship of the symbols. Noah, for instance, was recollected in connection with the deluge, and consequently, after a time, was venerated as the fish god Dagon under the form of a fish, to be found on the cave and other stones of Scotland and Ireland, resembling the Dagon of the Philistines and Babylonians. This symbol is also to be found in Egypt and in China. Perhaps all of the symbols that go to show an intimate connection between the Celt, the Hebrew, and the Chaldean, none is more ancient and at the same time truthful than the cross, commonly supposed to have taken its significance from Calvary. That this notion is erroneous, the next few pages will show. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and I'll see you in chapter 6. Cheers.